Makes me sound good. I'm hyped for myself. I don't even, that's good. I like that. Hey, welcome y'all. Nice to see everybody here. Would you mind if we bow our heads just a second to get right in my mind? It helps me a lot if you don't. Is that okay? All right. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for the souls and the minds in this room. In such a hopeless feeling, in such a desperate time that we feel the pressures and the negativity, I see positivity here. May your spirit pervade. May you come now and be with us. May you stoke the fires of fellowship, of compassion, of camaraderie, of joy, and yes, of recovery, that we might serve the community and restore lives where they have been lost, and restore rightful ruling of your Son, Jesus Christ. In his name we pray, amen. All right, thank you so much. I hope everybody doesn't mind that. But that was a suggestion made to me a long time ago, because if I get to talking too long, I forget who this is really about. So there's one true physician, and it is not me. And I just wanted to say, I don't know anybody here, right? Bunch of strangers. People ask me, where do I work? Y'all tell me. I don't know. It's a good to serve. I was blessed enough to struggle with addiction and drinking myself. Pretty bad. I had a pretty bad case of alcoholism and addiction. I came out here in 2006. No hope of recovery at all. Just kind of a broken soul. And I really can't explain this story. I know there's some in the room that were with me that could probably tell a better story. I just know that somewhere along the way, a slight and subtle change in my personality was able to happen to where I was transformed, and I was able to have all those wonderful things that he read in my, it's just an honor and a blessing. And really what I am is I'm a servant. I was bestowed these opportunities, and let me just kind of back up and just tell you that when I wrote the title for my lecture, it was, I said, why are we all dying? Why we're never going to get better? And my wife said, you're so dramatic. Like, come on, like, you really? And I'm like, I know, but you got to know a backstory. When I was asked to submit my title, I just left the clinic, and there was a follow-up I was supposed to have. This beautiful, young, 28-year-old mother, she came in a month before, and she was saying, I love fentanyl. And I'm like, I feel you. I used to too. Like, it's awful. It's evil. Anybody in here know anybody that struggled with addiction? Or okay, good. I just want to make sure. And then, has anybody? I won't ask you all that. But myself, I struggled with addiction, and I related to her so much. And she was telling me I need help. So we made a phone call, and we got her placed, and we had a bed all lined out. And she didn't go. And she had a 4-year-old daughter, beautiful, and I got the notification probably that morning before I submitted my title that she had passed away. So just gone, beautiful and gone, and her daughter is going to grow up without a mother. So how do we get here? Let's give a little story. I want to thank you, doctors, for your excellent presentation. I love the demographics. That should be alarming. In 2019, the total was 49,670 souls documented that we lost. And in 2020, it just came out as 69,000 and about 240 souls lost. And I have no doubt that we're creeping towards that awful red line of 100,000. And if you know the story, that number is probably should have already been there, but it's because of the interventions like Narcan and stuff that's been available. When I do an intake with a person now at a treatment center, they often tell me, yeah, I died 3 times. Don't blink, don't say a thing. Yeah, I overdosed. Yeah, my friends too. Have you lost anybody? Yeah, 3 of my friends gone. And they're not phased. They're like desensitized to that, and that's an awful, awful thing. And that underscores why I said, it's always going to be with us, because we're dealing with a culture that is getting used to this awful, awful state. And that should not be a thing, guys. That should not be like a number on a chart, and then, okay, well, let's do a little bit better, and no, we're the ones. This is on our watch. Everybody in this room is on notice. Like, it is our job. This is our time. We inherited the opiate epidemic, and we're working in the field. So what are we going to do? What are we going to pass on to the next generation? How are we going to get that where it needs to be? I don't know. But I do know we're trying like heck to figure that out. The history of opium and why we got to this particular case is important, so I'll just briefly elucidate it. I was going to do PowerPoint presentations, but I tend to find that I get lost in them, but I just want you to stay with me right here. So You know, we all have endorphins. We're all designed to be taken care of when we have intense pain, and wonderfully so. That's a beautiful molecule. It makes sure that we don't suffer when we're unduly having some pain. And it makes sure that we recover too. It makes sure that we go out and we don't suffer, we don't pass out, we're able to deal with it, we're able to go back to our communities and have them tend to us and get better. It enables healing. It blocks out pain so we get out of the bed and move a little bit, and we're able to eat food, drink water, so we didn't just give up to our pain and resign to ourselves in bed. Well, fast forward, we found this plant called Papaver somniferum. It's a beautiful plant, it's a poppy, and if you scratch it, it lets out this wonderful milk. And the milk has 3 opiates, okay? So there are 3 natural opiates that we know of: morphine, codeine, and thebaine. And of those 3, we have wonderfully advanced ourselves in the chemical engineering to design opioids, which are synthetic. So I think that's really important to know that, like, in the cascade, there's really a lot of more robust synthetic opioids. And opiates, they still stay in the pod, they do what they're meant to do, but even they were abused. If you go way back, our first dance with opium begins way back. Like, Sumerians have been documented, milk of the poppy. In Egyptian cultures, it was known that that would aid in recovery, help with cough, help with infections. And then you get into the industrial age, whenever opium started being mass marketed, and you had a lot of industrial type things happening, people working intensely in large crowded conditions. That was a huge market. So at that point, opium went global. And it came from a lot of, like, mainland China, India, those type of things, where you had, like, a lot of nice hilly grounds, and they were pretty moist. There wasn't a lot of sun damage. So it was a robust time when agriculture intersected, globalism intersected, and industry spread this thing, and you have a global market. Well, opium was fine, but then we found out that it was a problem. So the wonderful minds in chemical engineering designed other opiates. The first substitution medication for opium was morphine. We said, we're going to get these people off we're going to transition them to this other drug. It's benign, it's safe, it's not as addictive. Well, it was. So then you had another problem. And at that time, morphine started coming into vogue right around the time we started getting together in the United States, like the Harrison Act around 1916, 1918, where we started delineating narcotics and assigning them their danger level and saying, we need to put some prescriptive pauses on this, because at that time you could just go in and buy a bottle of laudanum just full of morphine and drink it up and just kind of, you know, there was no requirement for a prescription. Well, that transition, the land that we live in became different when that changed, and you had to have a prescriptive authority of a Schedule 1, 2, 3, or 4 narcotic. Well, fast forward, morphinism became popular in a lot of higher society, and it became acceptable to inject these with a hypodermic needle. So then we saw that there was a problem with morphine. So at that time, we didn't really have a lot of robust substitution therapies, detoxes, so we pretty much incarcerated or warehoused these people if they didn't get better. We did other substitutions like cocaine and amphetamines, trying to get, centers tried a lot of, MAT is not a novel thing. Like, we've been trying to get this thing figured out for a while. And about the time of, like, 1940s, 1950s, if you look back at your beat poets, that's when diacetylmorphine was kind of coming into vogue, and they said, this drug is better. We'll use this drug to get people off morphine. It doesn't have the abuse potential. It won't be, you know, these people won't like it. They won't stay on it long. It's longer acting. It's not as dangerous. Well, diamorphine is heroin, right? So you had companies like Bayer Medicine kind of really putting that out, putting heroin in their cough syrup. So we leapfrogged to another problem. And then harm reduction, as it was born, became right around the 1960s, I believe, late 1950s. In the larger urban areas, we were overwhelmed with crime, with overdose death, with damage to our family structure. Children were starting to be raised in addicted households. And if you look at your large urban areas, you're like Chicago, San Francisco, definitely New York, they were overrun with crime. And we said, we need to find an answer. And at that time, methadone was found to be the first medication-assisted drug that was going to be given to people in a structured clinical setting. And you had to go in, get your dose. And we were basically saying, please stop stealing from us, stop burning down our community, stop robbing, getting in jail, stop overdosing. We'll give you your dope. Come in. This is a safe drug. It will act stronger than morphine, won't wear off. You won't be on it that long. Methadone is a great drug when used appropriately. And it really kind of calmed that. It kind of put down the fires, and we were able to kind of get our large urban areas under control and build up a lot of civic, a lot of social support for these programs for addiction, for recovery. You had a lot more hospitals like Bellevue's, your large hospitals that started kind of having addiction programs, and things got better for a while. Right about that time, we started delving off into the prescription opioids, and we knew that, well, we've always had prescription problems in this country, not necessarily because we're nefarious or anything, but we do have a lot of demand, and we always try to structure things where we serve the greatest amount of people and the greatest amount of care that we can give them. Well, a lot of that started delving into narcotics that were addictive, and at that time, pain medications were pretty much given, for surgical procedures, you got those type of things. But then we started kind of having, I don't know, I guess there's no real way to say it, but it started to be marketed heavily, and a lot of other drugs started coming on the scene that were also told to be non-addictive. One of the biggest ones was OxyContin, which I'm sure we all know about. And so OxyContin had its heyday, and I remember right in the height of my addiction, it was going to be a great drug because it was going to help with all my pain. It was not going to have addiction problems. It was going to last 12 hours, and my mind could turn off. I wouldn't have to constantly seek Norco or other things that I was trying to, or drink. And I've pretty profoundly realized this. When I first tried OxyContin, I was like, I want to have a relationship with this. I think this might be I kind of want you around forever, So, that was my first venture in the loss. My loving mother and father, they had all the dreams and aspirations of supporting all of my endeavors. And by about the time I launched over to my residency in Los Angeles County, I was fully addicted and on methadone and OxyContin. And my idea was like, kick the habit, gonna quit tomorrow. I got my residency, I went out there, lost the job, but I realized two things: that one, OxyContin was highly addictive, but two, the prescribing community started to become more nervous about the prescribing habits. So you got two things in play. You got like a highly touted, heavily marketed drug, and now it's in everybody's hands, and then you got regulatory stuff looking over guys like me, physicians, about how we're gonna write this stuff, how we're gonna be held accountable. So then about that time, we started having a lot of advocacy in the late 90s and early 2000s. You had a lot of great community model programs coming out saying, all right, we need longer term, more robust healing programs, and we need to try to look at getting rid of this OxyContin. So there was a lot of stuff. You guys remember, I don't know if you remember, I remember it because it was it was kind of like a final parting thing when they said, OxyContin no more, and they took it off the market. I think it was, want to say it's around 2012 or 11, and they transitioned, said, no more, we're not doing it, we're just doing immediate release OxyContin or other, oxycodone, I'm sorry, or other, less potent medications. OxyContin, as we knew and loved it, is gone. When that market dropped, you had a large demand, a largely addicted population that no longer had access to that level of drug. And guess who swooped in? But when there's a void, a market will be filled, and heroin became very prevalent. You guys may know this, but around the time I came out here in 2006, heroin, this was a blank spot. And that had a large reason to do with why I got sober. I came out here and I was stuck on a bayou and I couldn't score dope. So I had to listen to what they're telling me finally. I was suffering and I was like, oh gosh, what do I do? I prayed. I remember, I'll never forget it, prayed on the bayou, say, what am I gonna do? What should I do? How am I ever gonna get this? And about that time, my cabin guy said, get off your knees, get off your butt, let's go, we got work to do. And that was like, ding, that's what it is. Start to do work, stop complaining. Did not have access, did not have the ability to go and procure this drug. That's not the same for our people nowadays. Heroin is ever present, as you elucidated to. It's ever present, it's very cheap, and it's tainted with fentanyl. And not only that, now you have a market that has readily access to fentanyl, but it's bleeding into all other drugs of addiction. So what you were mentioning is something that I see a lot is, as far as the pressed tablets. So a pretty nefarious thing that we've seen is it's a tablet that looks a lot like your Xanax or something that you'd buy, or Adderall, but it's pressed and it has fentanyl in it. So you have a new naive population. You may have people that are not on opiates. They're not sensitive to it. They want these pills for something else, and they're being exposed to a very potent, very dangerous drug. Fentanyl is about 100 times more potent than morphine. If I have that correct, I'll defer to you for that. But so if you think about that, morphine is our kind of like you know, that's our like waterboard. We compare all our opiates. Well, how does it measure up to morphine? Well, you got morphine here, you got a lot, hydrocodone, a lot of stuff down here. You got your Dilaudid and other stuff that kind of dances up here. Oxycontin's a little bit higher, but not as, you know, morphine's still kind of, you know, it's still pretty recognizable. Well, when you take morphine, heroin's about 10 to 20 times more potent, which, whoa, that was a good deal. And then now you got fentanyl in a smaller dose is about 100 times. And there's other derivatives of fentanyl. And it's used by physicians like myself or surgeons most likely to really acutely manage intraoperative pain. People in the surgical suite, they're meant to be hit with this and it's supposed to wear off by the time they wake up. They're not meant to have this going on. Or you have your long-term terminal patients that are not going to get better. They have end-of-life issues, and they have chronic pain. You want to give them comfort, so you provide it transdermally. Well, now you got people selling fentanyl en masse and at very cheap. I mean, if you look at some of the, I'm sure that a lot of people here have looked at it, it's just everywhere, and it's a lot. When I started seeing the brick, I mean, it's just like, it registered as like, we're gonna have a problem here. This is not good, man. This is like, and it started happening. People started becoming more addicted. People started falling out more and overdosing. And what I do in my clinic, I kind of listen to my people. So what the culture, I'm here to report what I see and what I've heard from my fellow travelers that I encounter, and to keep them, you know, anonymous as they are. They've been through the journey. They went through the problems in the 90s and 20s with maybe they had a problem, they had a headache, and maybe they drank a lot and their friend gave them a Norco. They went to somebody who prescribed them liberal amounts of this medication, and it was a heyday. So that shut down. What did they do? They transitioned over to another drug, the OxyContin, you heard of those doctors that used to have like a large, it was basically, they call it a pill mill, where there was large facilities that were lined around the button, you just kind of churning it out. In large cities, I remember it was Houston when I was growing up. I'm sure everybody knows that like New Orleans is a major port for that too. So they did that for a while. Then OxyContin got shut down. Now heroin started coming up. Well, then Suboxone came along. So Suboxone is a great drug. It's an agonist-antagonist. Great drug when used appropriately. So if you could think about a drug that goes in there, and whenever I was addicted at the tail end of it, I was no longer getting euphoria and high. I just wanted to not feel that awful feeling for about 2 weeks when I didn't have drugs, where I just felt awful. I could not get comfortable. Right about the time I flipped this way, I needed to flip that way, pouring sweat, all the functions I had shut down lovingly with my morphine was now gone, and it was just anxiety, misery, GI distress, just the worst feelings you could have. If we designed a drug like we did with Suboxone, it sits on that, you don't have those withdrawal symptoms, and it caps the euphoria. You have like what they call it as a ceiling effect. If you take 2, you kind of get a little more, but if you take 3, you're not going to get the effect you need. It's going to lock out. So now patients are being put on Suboxone, which I liked. I thought that was a good idea. I came from a school of thought that was like, hey, you're all or none. If you're using something, you're not sober, you got to get it all zeroed out. And I found that just to be too hard for a lot of patients, where they were flying like Icarus, really close to the sun, really heavily addicted maybe to multiple substances. So Suboxone filled that gap really nicely. Okay, so now if you catch a pattern, we're kind of leapfrogging, always looking for the next logical, the best idea to get people off medically. And we are at Suboxone now, but Suboxone is presenting a challenge now because it is difficult to get off of this drug. I will tell you that the detoxification for Suboxone does not last 6 to 7 days. It lasts about a month, and it's a bimodal type peak. You have your acute phase detoxification, but then you have your delayed effect when your kappa and delta receptors are already quieted down. That's when craving starts to activate in the late phase of addiction. So I've had many a person that I spent hours and hours setting up this plan. We're going to come down, we're going to do this, you're going to go out, give you some comfort, call me, do that. Yeah, if we need to go detox, we'll do that. Maybe we'll slap a thing on your ear, help you out. But it just wears them down. They get really far out, and inevitably by the time they're on Suboxone, they get their things, the harm is reduced. They've gotten their job back. They've gotten their family back. They have responsibilities. They have to travel. They don't have a month to ache and bake and quake and shake. So they go back on the drug, and there's this giant cloud of patients that I have that are kind of hovering around looking to get off. Well, that's what we need you guys for. That's what we need the summit for. That's what we need the creative minds in this room for. And that's what we need physicians who understand what they're doing more. And I'm working on that part, I promise. I'm here to report that we physicians are a scared bunch. We're really scared because I'll speak for myself, I don't know business, but I know people, and I know when they hurt, I don't want them to hurt, and I know that I don't want to do stuff to make them hurt. But I don't know business well, and I get really scared when people tell me that I'm doing something wrong. So I just pull out. And that's what happens with a lot of us. When we have mandates that tell us prescribing habits are such, and you have a large burden population of patients that you treat a certain way, you may have a pendulum swing where you just shut it all completely down. But now you have a burden of patients that are maybe moderately or severely dependent that need to be served a specific way. So I'm working on that aspect of filling in that gap of how to properly and safely transition that. And I know for a fact that we're working on great access programs for patients for overdose, but we really need program. We need program. I want to say we need Jesus because we do. That's really what we need. We need compassion, we need love, we need honesty, but we don't need condemnation. We need to tell people, show them the mirror and say, we're still going to be here tomorrow. We're going to kick you in the teeth, and that's an awful thing you're doing. Do you see this? And I'm still your best friend. And we need creative minds that are here in the room to do this and to work with us all together as a community. I think it's really good to have like an idea, and it's really good to like endeavor upon that idea. But the best part about having a new idea is to meet people and to look at what other people are doing. I was down in Lafayette yesterday. Had a wonderful chance to talk to a lot of different type of people in counselors, administrators, physicians. And the number one thing was that I was talking about a drug named Vivitrol, which is it should be added to the later phases. It's an opiate blocker, much like naloxone. It is naloxone, but it's a long-acting drug, and it blocks that craving mechanism when they get off of all their opiates, so they can actually internalize all the program that you want to design for them. Well, to a person, they had a concern. They said, you know what? I just feel like I can't sink my teeth in them. I can't really get to where I want to get with them because, it's always kind of quibbling about medications. So medication-assisted therapy is just that. It's assistance. Like therapy is therapy, and regrowth and rebirth is regrowth. I mean, y'all think that like a physician really offers a lot to the table. I'm just the guy that meets them at the intake and says, look, I love you, you're a brother and all that, but you guys are the ones that are getting into the hard stuff that they're holding on to that won't let them get sober when they try to quit. The trauma they had, the loss they had, the family they lost in 2020 from COVID and nobody let them talk to them, that they didn't get to see them. The loss of children that we've had, just the financial, the ability for a man to stand up and provide for his family being taken away. Who's recovering from that? That's recovery. We talk very little about drugs and alcohol and treatment. We talk about living. We talk about pain. We talk about life. And I think that I really wanted to come and say that it's never going to be away from us. It's like, let's get over that. Like, it ain't going away. It's too monetized, and there's too many tendrils in the pot, too many people wanting to have their own part of this opiate epidemic. And I imagine it'll continue in another form down the road. But it will never go away until we get back to basics, and we're honest with each other, with love, and saying, there's not probably a pill that will fix this. And there's not probably one form of thought or one school of thought in therapy that'll fix this. What's really going to fix this is taking the time, slowing down, investing in a patient, and committing them with relationship and walking through that with them through time. And if anything that I could say is that when we talk about summit, I just kind of meditated on that word, summit, and what that means. And that means a lot. Like, you guys have been through a lot in your lives. You've come from where you've come through. I know some of your stories, but you kind of go, and we all have reached this mountaintop here together. That's a miraculous thing. Like, the people I see in this room are amazing that I know. And the ones that I don't know and I heard about, they're amazing too. You've gotten to the top of the mountain, and this is where we got to do. This is us. We are the ones that are charged with it. We're not going to kick this can down the road and refer to somebody else. It's us, So we're at the top of the mountain. Let's do something about it. Thank you.